Welcome to the Strangers on the Way podcast. Today I'm pulling a little bit of an audible and felt prompted to interview myself. A friend of mine, I reached out for prayer a couple weeks ago. I was struggling just physically, and she was praying for me, and she just said, I feel like on the back of this, you're going to be interviewing yourself on your podcast, and it's just going to be a testimony of what God has done. And so I took her words to heart, and I really felt like God wanted me to share some of my story with our listeners this week. And so this episode is releasing not on a Monday, but a Tuesday, and it's actually the first day of spring. And when I was growing up, spring was in, I think the 20th of the month, 21st was like summer, winter, and then spring, fall was like the 20th. And so I just thought it was so interesting that spring was coming. It felt like early this year on the 19th. I'd never heard of that. But I really sensed that God is releasing a new season for us, and that we're stepping into promises and dreams and even things from childhood that we loved to do that we kind of forgot about. I felt like He is bringing them back for us in this season in a fresh way. And I really feel like He is showing us how He's the lover of our souls and how He's wired us so uniquely and specifically. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about the past 8 or 9 months for me and what God has done inside of my heart. This past summer was one of the hardest of my life. On the exterior, everything looked fine. Like, I had my job, I got to travel a bit. Things were going, pretty well, but a lot of things were also shifting. I was considering moving. A lot of my friend groups had just gotten married or in relationships, and so I was feeling quite lonely. And I just found myself having all of these things stripped from my life. And I felt so incredibly alone. And then in the summer, I started having immense fear, just fear in my physical body and fear of the future. And I actually had some friends, they're so wonderful. And I just have to shout out my dear friend Raj. I called him at 2 or 3 a.m. multiple times this summer, just being gripped in fear. And he prayed with me and stayed with me on the phone until I came out of it. And I have to give a shout out to my mom as well. She has been such a constant support through even moments where I felt like a crazy person. She has talked me off the ledge, is what we call it. I didn't want to die, but I was really struggling, and she would really help me just get my mindset back into a good place. And she would hold me, and she would be just present. And so anyway, so this summer was one of the hardest ever, just emotionally. And I felt all these things being stripped away. And then I also felt this promise from God in Psalm 16. And it talks about God being our portion and our, I'm going to read it. God, Lord, I have chosen you alone as my inheritance. You are my prize, my pleasure, and my portion. I leave my destiny and its timing in your hands. And I just felt like God said there's going to be 2 words for this season: process and portion. And I think I get really excited about quick fixes, and I guess that's probably our American culture as well. We get so excited about breakthrough and all of these things. But I felt like God was saying, no, this season's going to be a process. And also you're going to learn about me being your portion. And there's a verse in the Old Testament that talks about, instead of your shame, I'll give you a double portion. And it's just like, I think, this is what I think. I think in that verse, God is talking to people who grew up like not being valued, or almost like Cinderella. You know, she was, things were taken away from her, and then she was kind of not treated really well. And her name actually means shame. Cinderella is like, cinder is shame, I think, in Russian. But then she has this beautiful redemption story, and that's what I feel like God does. So like for his sons and daughters, that, well, really all of us, because I think shame is like the most basic thing that says like we're not enough and something is inherently wrong with us. Like God takes that on the cross and is like, no, like you're actually worth dying, and you're my beloved, you know, and not because of what you do or don't do, but like because you're my child. And so I felt like God was like, I'm going to show you that I'm your portion in this season. And I, in the midst of all the fear, I would wake up with just like an immense anxiety. I would also wake up with these songs in my head from childhood, like Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston, Celine Dion. These songs would just like, I'd wake up and I'd be gripped in fear. And then these songs would come up as well. And it's like The Power of Love, or like even Bruno Mars' Treasure, like treasure, that is what you are. You're my golden star. And so these songs, like song lyrics, would be playing in my head. And I knew they were from God because they were so random. Like these are songs I used to listen to when I was 10 or 12, a lot of them. And Celine Dion and Whitney Houston, like I grew up dancing to them in my living room with my cousins. Like these were our childhood songs. And I was like, okay, God, like what are you showing me? And it's been kind of actually fun because for like the past 4 or 5 months, every morning there will be a song that just comes up as I wake up. It will just come into my mind. A lot of them are older. And then I'll look at the lyrics and I'll be like, oh, I just know God's saying this to me today, or like reminding me of his love. And so this is all simultaneously happening. And then last year we were in 2023, and I just felt like Psalm 23 was such a big part of that year for us. And Psalm 23 talks about like God being our shepherd and our guide, and actually leading us into a place of rest, and then walking us through the valley of the shadow of death. And then on the other end of that valley, he takes us into like where goodness and mercy is chasing us, like favor is chasing us down. And I really feel like that is the season that he's been walking me through. And I think there's still bits and pieces, but I've realized there's a lot of mindsets and really trauma from the past that God was healing inside of my soul. And I felt like he said a couple times, like, Lauren, I'm on a mission for your soul. And so it's been like the most uncomfortable season. Growing up, I had a couple seasons of hardship where my dad had brain tumors, and just family going through really hard things. My dad ended his life in about 5 years ago, and those seasons all brought like their own parts of grief. And God met me in like wild ways. They were uncomfortable seasons. seasons that I wouldn't really wish ever again. But the way God met me in grief in those seasons was like none other. I just a quick story. I asked God right after my dad passed away. It was so sudden and unexpected. And I asked him, God, would you give me a vision of my dad in heaven so that I know like he's okay and he's safe? And I did this when my grandma passed away when I was 11. I asked God if I could have a rainbow so that I'd know she was okay. And my dad had come and picked my brother and I up from the my uncle's house to take us to my grandpa's house. And I was so heartbroken. My grandma was one of those grandmas who would bring all of the grandkids together. There were like 15 or 16 of us, and have grandma sleepovers once a year. And she was just the best. And so when she passed away, I was so heartbroken, and I was like, oh gosh, like, God, could you please give me a rainbow so I'd know she was okay? And as I was in the car, my grandma or my dad was driving. My head was face down in the back seat. I was just crying, so heartbroken. And a couple minutes later, I sat up, and over this cornfield we were driving by was the hugest rainbow that I ever saw in my life. And my tears like turned into like tears of joy, and I knew like God had answered my prayer, and I knew that my grandma was with him in heaven and that she was okay. And I told all of our relatives, and to this day, rainbows are such big symbols for our family, just of God's comfort and his promises. And so when my dad passed away, I was like, okay, God, you've done this before. Like, do it again. Can you please give me a vision of my dad in heaven? I just want to know that he is okay, safe with you. And I prayed that prayer for 4 years. And I was like, you're God. Like, you could give me a dream. You could give me a picture in my head. Like, you're God. Like, you can do anything. And I really struggled with grief. The first year was really I was numb. I don't really remember. And then the years following were really, really challenging. And I just couldn't understand like why it had happened. And I missed my dad. He was like really funny, really angry sometimes, but he was still my dad, you know? And so I wrestled with God. And I kept asking him I was like, all the time, I like, just give me a vision of him. Just give me a vision of him. Like, I just need it. And I know you can do it. And so last year or the year before, my friends and I, we decided to do a 3-day water fast together. And yeah, just on a whim. I think it was last summer. And we drank just water, hot water, so much hot water all weekend together. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. And I spent the weekend with friends. It was really actually one of my favorite memories of my life, I feel like, doing it together. And off the back of that, we ate so much food, like so much food. And which I don't recommend. You're supposed to break a fast like very carefully, but we stuffed our faces. And then we went to worship service in our church that night. And as we were there, normally our worship services are like loud concert, like really fun, energetic. But this one, the worship pastor said, hey, let's be silent for a little bit and actually connect with God and listen to him. And I was like, okay. So I laid down and I was just breathing, and I was like, okay, God, like, what do you want me to know? And there was this horse race place named Arlington Park that my family and I loved to go to when I was growing up. We would stay in this million room and have lunch and watch the horses and bet on them. And I'd make my $2 bet to place, and we would just have the best time. Well, Arlington closed last year, and I was so heartbroken again because it was like another death, and I was so sad. But all of a sudden, as I was there laying down at the worship night, I had this picture come to my mind, and Jesus was smiling, and he was standing in this green grass, and over the green grass was this tarp over something. And at Arlington Park, they had this beautiful flower arrangement that was red flowers, and it spelled out the word Arlington, and it was just stunning. And as I was in the vision in my mind, Jesus pulled this tarp off, and there were letters of flowers made into letters, red ones, and it said, "I love you." And it reminded me of Arlington Park. And I was like, okay, Jesus, like, thank you. I love you too. And I was like, that reminds me of Arlington. And Jesus, I just felt him ask me, do you know that there's an Arlington in heaven? And I was like, really? Like an Arlington Park in heaven? And I really feel like heaven actually is like a lot like earth and just like perfected. And so I believe there's cities and towns and like movie theaters, and yeah. So I was like, okay, yeah, like I could see that there'd be an Arlington in heaven. And so he's like, do you want to go? And I was like, okay. So Jesus took me by the hand, and we walked up. There's this cement walkway that goes into the white steps, or white like fence to get you into the building, this like beautiful building. And so we walked in through this beautiful white gate and walked through the park. And then on the other side, as you go through the building, there's all these rows of seats, and then there's the horse track. And the stadium was empty, except there was one person there. And so Jesus and I walked toward that person, and his back was to me, and Jesus was holding my hand. And this person turned as I got to the row of seats, and it was my dad in this vision. And I just started crying, and I got to hug him, and I just said, Dad, I miss you so much. And I said, how's heaven? Like, what's it like? And he just said, I love it here. And he, I said, like, what do you do in heaven? Like, what do you do? And he just said, we eat. And my dad loved food so much. I get that from him. And so I just laughed, like, oh my goodness, of course you would say that. And then my dad took a baton, and he, like a track baton, and he handed it to me, and he just said, like, now it's your turn, like, run the race. And yeah, he said, run the race. And so I took the baton, and then I kind of came out of the vision, and I was crying, but tears of joy, because God had answered my prayer. Like, for 4 years, I just wanted to ask God, like, to see my dad in heaven, and I know he did it, and he did it in such a creative way. And I know it was real. Like, I know I was walking through heaven, and I know my dad's so happy. And so I just say that, all of that, to say, like, God has met me in so much grief and pain in such beautiful ways, and in the wrestle and in the struggle. And so fast forward to now, and I've watched my dad, go through brain tumors and passing and grieving his passing, and walked through family members going through things. But this season, it's like, okay, now I'm walking through my own valley of the shadow of death, and I'm looking at, like, I don't know, Jesus is like after my heart now, is what I feel like. And he is healing the places inside of me that have been wounded, and he's just preparing me for greater healing and freedom. And so I really do feel like, though, it's been a season of walking through the valley of the shadow of death for my own self, and Jesus is meeting me in it. Like, there's a verse in Psalm 23 that says he prepares a feast for us in the presence of our enemies. And so I feel like in the midst of fear and like anxiety, he has also been singing these songs over me from my childhood. And I know he's restoring me to who I originally have been. And I don't know about you, but life just like cuts us and beats us up, I feel like. And what Jesus comes and does is he begins a relationship with us, and then he starts pulling off all these layers that are not even like a part of us, but have just been put on us from like life being hard. And then we get to be our original authentic selves again, and almost like who we were as kids, like if we were able to be kids. And then we get this beautiful father who is like excited, not because of what we do, but like because we're his kids. And then we get to be daughters and sons of like this guy who runs the whole universe. And then he just invites us to like go create things with him, and then go help other people discover who they are and like how he's made them, and heal from all their stuff that the world has thrown on them. And it's just this beautiful plan and beautiful journey. And I always ask God, like, why the crap? Like, why the hardship in this life? And like, I keep getting drawn back to the hero's journey in like movies, and how we are so drawn to that journey of like, you get your guide and you go on this adventure, and there's like ups and downs, and like you come out, on the other end, and like there's victory, and we're all like invited into this story because it's written in our DNA, and the things that we overcome are a part of it. Like there is purpose in the trials that we face, and all of that process is like, I don't know, I think we realize at some point, at least hopefully, that we're not alone in it. And then God is with us. So then no matter what we're going through, whether good or not good, it's like we have this anchor for our souls, this anchor, this dad that we can always look to. And then he just walks with us through it all, and talks and makes us laugh, and reveals himself to us. And it's just the most beautiful story that anyone could ever write. And I felt I lost two things a couple, maybe a year or so ago. One was my Bible. It was my favorite Bible. It was the Passion Translation, which just it's like a poetic Bible that kind of delves into like the meaning behind the words. And I marked this Bible up like all over the place. And I love this book, the Song of Songs, that is in the Passion Translation, because it really talks about the same thing, this hero's journey of this woman who this king like loves, and he sees so much beauty in her, and she doesn't see it in herself. Like he says, truly you're my rose, and she's like, no, like I've got all this, like I'm not. And he's like, no, you are. And so it's this journey of her discovering like the king, what he thinks of her, and this like her going back and being afraid and like going, but like really being drawn to him. And then finally at the end they're like together, and it says like she's clinging to her beloved. And then they get to go and like teach other younger people on the journey who are just starting it, like how to do this too. And it's such a picture of our journey of faith, because like God sees us as flawless. Jesus came, like all that is taken care of. He did it all. And so like we're on this journey to discover like everything that he gave through his death and his resurrection to us. And God sees us like as completely whole. And we're on this journey to like realizing that's who we really are. And so anyway, so I lost this Bible, and I was so sad because it's like almost like history, almost like your diary, and I was so bummed, and I looked for it at the church and everywhere and couldn't find it. And then I also lost a pair of scissors that I've had forever, these orange scissors. And in the past like couple weeks, one day, I don't even know how I saw it, but I looked behind my couch and there was the Bible. It had fallen through to the back side of the couch, and it was there. And so I've just been reading through it and just being reminded of like all the history with God. And then yesterday I literally found also under my bed this pair of scissors, orange scissors that I'd had that I had lost. And I felt like God saying like, hey, it's a pruning season for my bride. And I was drawn to John 15. It talks about like God is the gardener, the Father's the gardener, and he cares for the branches connected to Jesus, it says, which is us, by propping up the fruitless branches and pruning every fruitful branch to yield a greater harvest. And he talks about like the words he spoke over us have already cleansed us. So like we're already clean, we're already whole, but we have to remain in life union with Jesus because he remains in life union with us. And then as we are connected in relationship, that's where we bear fruit. And I just was reminded with the scissors, I just felt like he was like, yes, like this has been pruning, and it's like so uncomfortable, and things are taken away, and like relationships are shifting, and it's like all this fear is coming up and all this different crap, but it's unto something. And then I was just reminded of a couple chapters before in John 13, he talks about washing feet. And it says like Jesus told Peter, like, I need to wash your feet. And Peter was like, oh no, but then he finally gave in. And then he's like, Jesus is like, you're already clean. You've been washed completely, and you just need your feet to be cleansed. And then he says, now go and wash one another's dirty feet. And so I just love this because we're already clean. Like Jesus is the righteousness of God. So like he puts us in right standing. Like there's nothing separating us from God anymore. Like nothing at all. And I don't know. I don't think our sin even separated us, because when Adam and Eve messed up, like God went after them. So I don't know, just side note, but we kind of separated ourselves maybe. So anyway, so then there's no separation. But he says like, wash each other's dirty feet. And I just feel like this is a season where we get to also remind each other who we are, remind each other like who God has made us to be, and then us to like step into those places. And that's one of the reasons I felt prompted to share today. Like God's like, Lauren, you've played small, and shame has covered you, but like there's no shame anymore. Like Jesus covered that. And so I want you to speak, girl. Like you have a story to tell, and the world needs to hear it, because by doing this, you're going to wash people's feet, and you're going to wash just the shame off of them too. And then they're going to step into who they're meant to be. And then we're just going to have this beautiful, beautiful earth of sons and daughters that are rising up to take their place. In Romans, it talks about sons and daughters, like the creation groans for sons and daughters to be revealed. And I believe that's the beauty inside of us, how God created each of us. The world is groaning, the creation is even groaning, because once we know who we are and that all the muck is gone, then we get to step in and do what we were born to do, what God's created us to do. And then that's what changes the world. People invent things and write books and create films, and it's happening all over. I really do believe we're in this awakening of who God's made us to be. And the bride is rising up in love and in family. But I think it's going to happen even more and more. And so as we continue to wash each other's feet and remind each other how loved we are, then it gives us courage to stand in places and to fight injustice and to love the unlovable, and that's what changes the world. That's literally what, like, the kingdom coming to earth and destroying the works of the devil. That's what it means. It's love entering in every space that we have in the earth. And then I really believe Jesus will come back then after everyone's risen up and taken their place in his story. And so I just wanted to share a couple of these things with you this week. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you for making space for me to share my heart. And I just pray, if you're going through a pruning season, if things are getting stripped away, if it feels like you're in the wilderness is the place where people actually encountered God, and he set them right, like, on the path, or he changed them or transformed them. And so I just want to remind you today, like, if it feels like you're in the wilderness or surrounded by enemies of fear or doubt, or depression, that I believe God is preparing a feast for you. And I believe he's going to speak to those tender places in your soul. And I believe he's going to reveal just what lies are holding you back, so that he can chop off those mindsets and bring you into greater freedom for the next season that he's leading you into. And so, yeah, I just pray hope over you today. I pray for an increase of faith, and just a knowing that God is going before us. He is preparing the way, and he's the one, like, building the house. That's what I keep thinking of. Yesterday, my neighbor, I love my neighbors, he opened up this kind of extra room that we have on our apartment floor, and he said, "Look what I'm making my granddaughter." And he was building her this beautiful white painted kind of house thing for all of her clothes, and it had a pink chair. And I just felt like the Father saying, like, oh, that's what I'm building. Like, I'm building for my kids too. And so he's building a structure inside of us, I believe, in this season, to hold more love for the next. And so we can trust him to be the gardener. We can trust him with the scissors, as hard as it might be. And he's not done. He's not done with us. He's not done with you. He's not done with me. We're in process, and it is a beautiful journey, and he's with us, like, in the process, and he's next to us, and he's going before us and behind us, and we're learning how he is our protector. We're learning how to run into him. We're learning how to stay rooted in Jesus. And it's just a beautiful journey that he has us on. And I just pray that some of this ministered to your heart today. I pray that you won't give up, and just trust that he is preparing things that you have no idea about, and he's going to be with you, and you don't have to even know how it's all going to work, but he is opening things up, and you can trust him. And I just keep seeing, like, Jesus and you with your hands together, and you're just jumping off of a cliff into a beautiful, bright blue body of water. And I believe he is restoring joy over you in this season. I believe he's taking care of just the dirty wounds, and cleansing the pain of the past, so that he can bring you into greater joy and love. And one of the other things he told me, I was really struggling like 2 weeks ago, and he said, and I was kind of feeling shame, like, I'm like, oh, I'm so weak, and I've really struggled being weak. But he said, or the verse came to mind, "A bruised reed I will not break." And I have held on to this, because the world sometimes will say get it together or whatnot, but he was like, I'm not like that, Lauren. My love is, or I am patient, I am kind, I'm gentle. And so he's like, when we come to him in our frailty and in our pain, in our weakness, he doesn't break us. He loves us and he understands, and our pain makes sense given what we've walked through. And so he walks us through it, he talks us through it, he brings us people, and then we walk forward, and and we get to be a little more healed, you know, every step of the way. And so yeah, I just speak that over you. If you feel like you're bruised and broken, like he's not going to break you. That's not how he restores. But he's going to meet you in your pain, and he's going to bring you through. And so I just love all of you. Thank you so much for being on the Strangers on the Way journey. It's an honor to know you through this message platform. And I just know God has beautiful plans ahead for you, and it's going to be a beautiful season, and you can trust him, and he's just drawing you deeper into his heart. And so I just pray that over all of us today, and I love you guys so much. I'm so grateful for who you are. All right, love you.